Hello, readers. Good day. Good day to everyone. I hope you guys are all doing very splendid. And new welcomes to those of you who have not seen my channel before, and welcome back to everyone else who has. I appreciate you being here. So Kim here with Native Lady Book Warrior, and oh my gosh, I'm actually taking a work break right now. And yes, this is coffee. So but I am very happy to be focusing on work because I'm very grateful to be doing what I love. And so a night without sleep is kind of like a work slumber party with my laptop and my thoughts. So it's not something that's gonna hurt me very much, but I'm here with my cup of joe, and so I am going to be reviewing right now Marcie R. Rendon's Murder on the Red River. So, all right, excellent reader people, let's get this started. Hi again. Right now, I will be reviewing Marcie R. Rendon's Murder on the Red River. Marcie R. Rendon, who is an Indigenous author from the White Earth Anishinaabe Nation, and she has also another good book coming out, or actually, it's already out. I think it's called Girl Gone Missing, but I'm hoping to purchase that very, very soon, and that's something I'm excited to read as well. This book follows a young 19-year-old Native woman from the White Earth Nation. Her name is actually Renee Black Bear, but throughout the entirety of this book, she's always being referred to as Cash. So during this book review, I'm going to call her Cash. This Cash is a native chain-smoking pool shark who lives in Fargo or near Fargo, Minnesota, and gets by doing farm work or grain farm work in the Red River Valley. This book takes place in 1970, and I had to admit that I had to look up what kind of car she was driving. So it's a Ford, was it Ranchero? And it kind of looks like an El Camino. But that small detail alone gave me an idea when this was, and I assumed it was like in the 1970s, and later on in the book they share that date as well. So this book starts with the murder of a Red Lake Native man, and a friend of Cash, who was Sheriff Wheaton, welcomes Cash to the crime scene with ease. And you already see that somehow they have an established relationship, and then they get into what that relationship is like. So this book, I mean, even on the back, it says crime fiction. So I was expecting to be drawn into some really cool, complex webs of criminal investigation or even some juicy psychological thrill, but it didn't take me that long to realize that the crime was just basically a backdrop to what was going on with Cash, our protagonist. And simultaneously looking at that history and past and how she relates that to what is going on in the present time of the story, she is exploring, or we're exploring, racial violence against Indigenous people in border towns, continued systemic assimilation policies, and oppression against Native peoples, historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, and also that very much sweet, bitter life that Native people struggle with, and also their challenges with the system in terms of foster care. Cash was a character that I very, very much enjoyed. She was awesome. I feel like, I don't know, I would be cool enough to hang out with Cash, but Marcie's writing of her life experiences with the American foster care system was very on point, and it really boomed a dark place inside my heart and in my head that I wasn't quite ready for. If I were to pick one word to describe Cash, it would probably be survivor. I enjoyed her flaws. She wasn't a perfect person, and because of that, I connected to this character more. I wanted to, I cheered her on, and those flaws were essentially important because they were realistic, and because of them, Marcie's writing of her really drew me in. Her past also is often triggered by some mundane detail in the story, and it very wonderfully veers off and to a traumatic memory that is most commonly what Cash experienced as a child because of the foster care system. And I had to admit, I had to call my mom and delve deeper into a little bit more of pre-ICWA. So you guys are probably wondering, what the heck is ICWA? So ICWA is a federal Indian policy that happened after the adoption era. So when you delve more into Native studies in the United States, there's these different eras. There's termination era, there's assimilation era, the adoption era. So all these different eras that you talk about if you're looking at Native studies in that linear sense. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even tell you what ICWA was. So ICWA is the Indian Child Welfare Act. So again, in the 1950s, the United States started the Indian Adoption Project. Its goal was to stimulate the adoption of Indigenous children to mainly non-Native white American families. The project claimed it was trying to promote the adoption of the forgotten child. But what was really interesting about the Indian Adoption Project was that Native families and Native tribes, Native communities wanted to keep those children. But this U.S. policy really pushed them to be separated from it. And it was advertised to the American public that these children were unwanted, that they had very awful living standards, that they were impoverished families and impoverished communities. And in the 1960s, I believe, of the statistics that they have out there, is about 1/4 of children weren't even with their original families. And these homes, many of the Native children went into, I mean, there were positive experiences. Many have, during that time in the foster care system, suffered physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, and even sexual abuse. But one of the things that they all found in common was most of these children lost that connection to their nations, to their tribes, to their communities, and to their peoples. So the Indian Child, well, I can't even say it. Oh, okay. The Indian Child Welfare Act, ICWA, it was a federal legislation that strived to protect the best interest of Indian children and to promote the stability and the security of Indian tribes and families by the establishment of minimum federal standards or requirements for the removal of Indian children from their families and from their homes. So if they were to move, whatever family they were placed in, it had to reflect the unique values of Native culture. So basically, in more simpler terms, this federal legislation, or ICWA, strive to keep Native children with Native families. So ICWA provides guidance and standards to state governments regarding the handling of child abuse and child neglect cases that involve Native American children or Indigenous children. If you're not following my channel, I also did a review on The Marrow Thieves by Cherie Demoline, which explored the boarding school era and boarding school history in that book. And also I reviewed The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, which explored racial tension and racial fueled violence in border towns. So those two books very much beautifully and fortunately set up my reading for Rendon's book. So another thing that I very much appreciated and learned was that if there is a disruption in Native culture, Native learning, and being apart from Native families, then through assimilation and systemic violence and systemic oppression, it can bring so much harm to a Native community. And in Rendon's book, we learned of that theft of Native children through the foster care system. So basically, that continued oppression of people, Native people, that continued on from the boarding schools and then did like a small jump into the American foster care system. So, my rating. I really don't want to share any more details in this book because it was quite good. And I feel like if I get too much into it, then I feel like I'm going to ruin it because, I just can't stop talking about a book. So overall, and in conclusion, I give this book 4 stars. Only because I feel like, and maybe this was Rendon's intention, was I felt like I had to do a little bit more digging to find out, well, why is it that she was placed with foster family? Why is it that this was happening? I knew of ICWA, but I didn't know all the super details. And I had to do a little bit more digging to engage with this story and what was going on and to draw on the experiences of Cash and what she went through and understand her triggers and her trauma that was connected to everything that was going on in the story. So I feel that if you didn't know about ICWA or not know about Native issues, then maybe this book wouldn't have hit so hard. But I don't know. I might not. I'm sure, or I hope people would understand that history of the American foster care system and how it's basically ripped Native children away from their families after the boarding school era. But also, even I admit I need to learn a little bit more on ICWA and how to ensure that the protection and well-being of Native children continues to be protected. Because, one of the things that Rendon does very well is to share a story to make sure that history does not get repeated, right? Because Native children, they are very much the future of Indigenous communities, and they are going to be the ones carrying so many things forward, leading sovereign nations, fighting for environmental and land rights, and for religious freedom, and also to carry that cultural knowledge, languages, and understanding forward. So they are very, very important. Another thing that I kind of wish there was a little bit more complexity with the criminal investigation, and I feel like I wanted more of that. And because it was labeled as a crime fiction novel, so I was kind of like, where's the investigation? So that was another thing. Okay, so oh my goodness. So Marcie R. Rendon, thank you very much for this book. I learned a lot. And if you would like to hear my bookish thoughts, likes, and loves of this book, I learned a lot just talking with my mom about this. And another thing that I wanted to add is I actually went out for a walk today, a very long walk, and to say a prayer for all of those children who are probably grown by now and living their lives, but just to encourage them, and I hope that they find their way home. And I encourage our people, our Native Indigenous communities to be there to receive them. So that was another thing that I also wanted to add. So, okay. Thank you so much, readers. I hope you guys are doing safe. I hope your families are safe. Check in on your elders, check in on your family and friends through phone call or what have you. And I hope you all are doing very well. And also, I encourage you to read this book. It was a fairly good read. And until next time, I shall see you all later, right? So, Kim here with Native Lady Book Warrior, and I shall see you soon. Bye. Ura puna taka mo